I lived alone for 3 years after my son vanished without a word. Then, on my 63rd birthday, he suddenly resurfaced, sending me a $4,000 bottle of vodka. I couldn't drink it because of my heart condition. Later that night, he called, his voice tight with nerves. "Dad." "How was the vodka?" I told him calmly. "I gave it to our family lawyer." He loved it. The line went dead for a second. Then he exploded. "Dad, what the hell did you do?" 24 hours later, everything fell apart in ways I never could have imagined. Hey there. Thank you for being here today. If this is your first time on the channel, consider subscribing and turning on the bell so you never miss a story. I'd also love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from in the world. Just a quick note. This story blends imagination with life experience, created for reflection and entertainment, with characters and events thoughtfully crafted. I'd been awake since 5:30, the same way I had been nearly every morning for the last 3 decades. Old habits from my years on the Ridgeview Police Department refused to fade. 25 years in uniform, 3 years into retirement, and my body still followed the same rhythm: up before sunrise, coffee brewing by 6. The quiet of the morning stretching out like an old routine I no longer questioned. Kate used to tease me about it. "You're allergic to sleep," she'd say, laughing as she shuffled into the kitchen in her robe. She was right about most things. The doorbell rang at exactly 7. The sound startled me. I stood there for a second, coffee mug halfway to my mouth, listening to the echo fade through the house. I wasn't expecting anyone. These days, nobody really came by unannounced. Not since Kate died. My 63rd birthday wasn't the kind of occasion people remembered anymore. Back when Kate was alive, birthdays had meant something. She'd bake her lemon cake, the one that filled the whole house with the smell of sugar and citrus. She'd invite neighbors I barely knew, decorate the kitchen table, insist on candles, even when I protested that I was too old for them. But Kate had been gone for 5 years now. Cancer had taken her quietly, methodically, the way winter slowly claims the last leaves of autumn. Since then, birthdays had become just another Tuesday in October. I set my mug down and walked toward the front door. Through the small window beside it, I caught a glimpse of a FedEx truck already pulling away from the curb, its tires hissing across the wet pavement. Outside, Oregon's usual gray drizzle had returned, misting the porch and the gravel driveway beyond. On the welcome mat sat a cardboard box, medium-sized, clean shipping label, no return address. I stepped outside and picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. The label read, "Edgar Drake, 47 Maple Ridge Road, Ridgeview, Oregon, 97401. The sender line was blank, just a tracking number and a date stamp from 2 days earlier. Portland. My stomach tightened. I hadn't heard from anyone in Portland in 3 years. I carried the box inside and placed it on the kitchen table. For a moment, I simply stared at it, my mind working through the possibilities the way it used to when I worked a case. The rational part of me, the detective who had spent decades following evidence and instinct, told me to open it. Another part of me, the quieter part that had learned over the years that silence from certain people could be a blessing, suggested throwing the whole thing straight into the trash. I stood there for another minute before finally reaching for the kitchen drawer. I took out a knife and sliced through the packing tape. The flaps opened easily. Inside, buried beneath a layer of white foam peanuts, was a bottle. Not an ordinary bottle. This one looked like something you'd see behind glass in a museum. The glass was crystal-cut, tall and rectangular, its sharp edges catching the light from the window. Inside, the liquid glowed a deep amber, warm and rich in the morning sun. The label was black velvet embossed with platinum lettering. Blackthorn Crystal Reserve, 1952. I lifted the bottle carefully. This wasn't the kind of liquor you grabbed at the corner store for $50. This was the kind of bottle collectors displayed on shelves with spotlights and security locks. Beneath the bottle sat a small, cream-colored card. I recognized the handwriting immediately before I even finished reading the words. "Happy birthday, Dad. I hope this makes up for lost time. Dominic, my son." The handwriting was the same as it had always been, clean, precise, almost mechanical. I hadn't seen it in 3 years. The last letter Dominic sent had been short and cold. A single page explaining he was moving to Portland for work and wouldn't be visiting for a while. After that, there had been nothing. No phone calls, no holidays, no explanations. Just silence. And now this. I turned the bottle slowly in my hands, studying the label again. If the year was genuine, the bottle had to be worth a small fortune. I pulled my phone from my pocket and searched the name. The results appeared instantly. Blackthorn Crystal Reserve. 1952. Last known auction sale, $3,800. I stared at the number. $3,800. For vodka. Dominic worked in IT. He made decent money enough to live comfortably, maybe travel a little, but not the kind of money you casually spent on a $4,000 birthday gift. At least not the Dominic I remembered. The Dominic I remembered had called me 2 years ago asking for a $500 loan because he couldn't make rent. The Dominic I remembered had promised to pay it back. He never did. I set the bottle down slowly and stepped back from the table. Something about this didn't feel right. Maybe it was the 3 years of silence. Maybe it was the fact that Dominic had never been sentimental. Grand gestures weren't his style. Or maybe it was simply the instinct that had kept me alive through 25 years of police work. My gut rarely lied to me, and right now it was screaming. I glanced toward the window where the rain continued to tap softly against the glass. Kate would have been thrilled. She would have opened the bottle, immediately poured 2 glasses, and raised a toast to reconciliation. She always believed Dominic would come back eventually, that the distance between us was temporary. A phase, she used to call it. Kate believed time fixed everything, but Kate wasn't here anymore. And over the 5 years since she died, I had learned something she never got the chance to understand. Sometimes time doesn't heal cracks. Sometimes it only makes them deeper. I looked back at the bottle. Part of me wanted to open it right there just out of curiosity, to see if a $3,800 vodka tasted any different from the cheap $15 bottle sitting in my cabinet. But another voice in my head, the louder one, told me not to. Not yet. Not until I understood why it had arrived. Instead, I reached for my phone again and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. David Whitmore. David had been my lawyer for 30 years. More importantly, he was one of the last people I trusted. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Edgar," he said warmly. "Happy birthday, old man. What can I do for you?" I looked down at the bottle sitting on my kitchen table. "David, I said you got time this afternoon. I need to swing by your office. For what need to talk about my will?" There was a brief pause on the line. "My God," David said. "You feeling all right?" I watched the amber liquid inside the crystal bottle catch the light. "Just want to make sure everything's in order," I replied. "My health hasn't been great since Kate passed. Figured it might be time to update a few things." David sighed softly. "Of course. Come by around 4. I'll pull your file." "Thanks," I said. Then I added, "And David, I'm bringing you something. Oh, a little thank you gift. For putting up with me all these years." David chuckled. "You don't need to do that." "I insist." We hung up a moment later. I stood there in the quiet kitchen, staring at the bottle. Then I carefully placed it back inside the box. I covered it with the foam peanuts, folded the cardboard flaps closed, and pressed the tape firmly into place. If Dominic expected me to drink that vodka, he was going to be disappointed. By the time I climbed into my truck later that afternoon, the rain had stopped. The streets still shone with moisture reflecting the dull October sky. I placed the box carefully on the passenger seat and started the engine. The truck rumbled to life. I backed out of the driveway and headed toward the downtown Ridgeview. Beside me, the sealed box remained silent and heavy, a question I wasn't ready to answer. At exactly 4 o'clock, I parked outside Whitmore and Associates, a 3-story brick building on the corner of Main and Oak. I grabbed the box, locked my truck, and stepped inside. David's secretary Mary looked up from her desk and smiled. "Mr. Drake, David's expecting you. Go on back." I walked down the narrow hallway, knocked twice on David's office door, and stepped inside. David stood behind his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, flipping through a file. He looked up and grinned. "Edgar," he said. "Good to see you." Then he nodded toward the box in my hands. "What's in there?" I set it carefully on his desk and met his eyes. "Vodka," I said. "Expensive vodka." "From my son." David's eyebrows rose. "Dominic," he asked. "I thought you two weren't speaking." "We're not." I folded my arms. "That's exactly why I'm here." David studied me for a long moment, the way only a lawyer with 3 decades of courtroom experience could. It was a patient, deliberate look, the kind that waited quietly for the rest of the story to reveal itself. He didn't rush me. He never did. Finally, his gaze shifted to the box sitting on the desk between us. With careful hands, he lifted the lid. Inside, the crystal bottle caught the afternoon light pouring through the office window. David reached in and lifted it out, turning it slowly in his hands. I watched his eyebrows climb higher with every second. "Blackthorn Crystal Reserve," he murmured, reading the label. The glass sparkled as he rotated it, the cut edges scattering light across the desk. "Edgar, this is what $3,000, $3,800, I said. "That's what the internet says." David let out a low whistle and placed the bottle gently on the desk, as though it might shatter if handled too roughly. "And Dominic sent you this?" he asked, out of nowhere. After 3 years of silence. "That's what the card says," I replied. "Happy birthday. Hope it makes up for lost time." David leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepling beneath his chin as he studied both the bottle and me. "What do you think it means?" I shrugged, though the tight knot in my stomach hadn't loosened since the moment I saw the shipping label. "I don't know," I admitted. "That's exactly why I didn't drink it." I nudged the box slightly toward him. "That's also why I'm giving it to you." "Edgar, think of it as a thank you," I interrupted. "You've handled my paperwork for 30 years. Estate planning, taxes, Kate's medical directives. You deserve something better than another fruit basket at Christmas." David shook his head, smiling faintly. "You're paranoid." "I'm careful," I said. "There's a difference." He picked up the bottle again and examined the velvet label more closely. "Well," he said after a moment, "if you insist. Margaret will kill me if she finds out I turned down a $4,000 bottle of vodka." He set it down again. "You mentioned wanting to review your will." "Yeah. Pull the file. I just want to make sure everything's still current." David nodded and rose from his chair. He walked over to the tall steel filing cabinet in the corner of the office, the heavy kind with a combination dial and reinforced lock. He spun the dial, unlocked the door, and pulled it open. After a moment of searching, he retrieved a slim manila folder. "Drake Edgar, Estate," he read aloud. He returned to the desk, opened the folder, and removed several neatly clipped pages. "My will, the one I'd signed in 2020, shortly after Kate's diagnosis." David skimmed through the first page. "Everything looks standard," he said. "Estate divided equally between Dominic and Sadie upon your passing. Pretty straightforward. Just want to review it, I said. Make sure nothing needs updating. Let me check the system as well, he said. David turned to his laptop and began typing. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as he logged into the firm's case management software. Let's see. Drake. Edgar. Estate planning. Then his hands stopped. He leaned closer to the screen, squinting slightly. Huh. What I asked. David didn't answer right away. Instead, he clicked through several more files. Then he slowly turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a PDF document. At first glance, it looked identical to my will, the same format, the same header, the same legal language. But the date at the top read August 15th, 2024. And the distribution clause was different. All assets, properties, and holdings to be transferred in full to Dominic Locke. 100%. Not split. Not conditional. Just Dominic. A cold feeling spread through my chest. I didn't sign that, I said quietly. David looked at me. You didn't come in last month. No, I said. I haven't been here since Kate's funeral arrangements. That was 4 years ago. David frowned and clicked into another window. There's an email attached, he said. October 8th. From Edgar, drake.official@gmail.com. I felt the knot in my stomach tighten further. It says you updated the will digitally, signed it electronically, asked me to prepare a hard copy. I don't have a Gmail account, I said. My email is Yahoo, same one I've had for 20 years. David opened another drawer and pulled out a second folder labeled Pending Review. Inside was a freshly printed copy of the same will. Same date, same language, same fraudulent distribution. 3 versions, 3 locations, all identical, all wrong. David slowly set the papers down and met my eyes. Edgar, he said quietly, someone is forging your documents. The words hung between us, like smoke after a gunshot. Dominic, I said. David didn't argue. Instead, he glanced toward the vodka bottle sitting on the desk. Something shifted in his expression. We need to call IT, he said. Trace when that file was uploaded. If someone hacked our server, do it. David reached for his phone, then paused. Actually, he said Mary can handle that faster. She's better with the tech side of things. He stood and walked toward the office door. Then he stopped halfway there. You know what he said? To hell with it. I've had a long day. Let me pour us a drink first. Then we'll deal with IT. David Edgar, he said, waving a hand dismissively. I've been working since 7 this morning. I just discovered someone tampered with my legal system. I'm having a drink. He walked to the small bar cart in the corner of the office and grabbed 2 crystal tumblers. Then he brought them back to the desk. With a soft crack, he broke the seal on the blackthorn bottle. The vodka poured clear and smooth. He filled both glasses and slid one toward me. To 30 years of friendship, he said. I didn't touch the glass. I'm on heart medication, I said. Alcohol doesn't mix well with it. David raised an eyebrow. Since when? Since Kate got sick, I said. My blood pressure hasn't been great. Doctor's orders. He shrugged. More for me, then. He lifted his glass and took a sip. A small one at first, then another. He set the glass down and smiled. Smooth, he said. Really smooth. No burn at all. I watched him carefully. The knot in my stomach twisted tighter. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. The forged will, the fake email, and a $3,800 bottle of vodka arriving the same week someone tried to rewrite my estate. David picked up his phone. All right, he said. Let me call Mary and have her start looking into this. He dialed. After a moment, Mary's voice came through the speaker, distant and tinny. David explained everything: the suspicious document, the email account, the possibility that someone accessed their system. Mary said she'd contact the IT technician first thing in the morning. The technician had already gone home. David thanked her and hung up. She'll have someone investigate in the morning, he said. I nodded, though I didn't like the delay. We talked for another 10 minutes. David asked about my health, about managing the house alone. I gave the same answers I always gave. Fine. Managing. He told me about a case he had just finished. I listened, only half-focused. My thoughts kept circling back to the forged will. Eventually, I stood. Outside, the sky had darkened toward evening. Thanks for this, David, I said, nodding toward the bottle. You sure you don't want it back? I'm sure I said. Enjoy it. David walked me to the door and shook my hand. I'll call you when IT figures something out. I nodded. Then I drove home. I reheated leftover chili in the microwave and ate it standing at the kitchen counter. For a while, I thought about calling Frank Miller, my old partner. But I didn't have anything concrete yet. Just a forged document and a bad feeling. So I went to bed early. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet house around me. The phone rang at 9:47 p.m. I was half asleep when the screen lit up on my nightstand. I squinted at the caller ID, Margaret Whitmore. I answered on the second ring. Margaret. Her voice came through the line like a breaking wave, ragged, breathless, barely controlled. Edgar, oh God, Edgar, it's David. Something's wrong. We're at the hospital. They think he's been. The word caught in her throat. Strangled. Then she forced it out. I was out of bed before Margaret finished the sentence. Years of police work had trained my body to react before my mind fully caught up. By the time her voice cracked through the phone again, I was already moving through the dark bedroom. My jeans were on the chair where I'd left them. I pulled them on, grabbed my keys from the nightstand, and kept the phone pressed to my ear. Margaret's words spilled over each other in a rush. Ambulance, chest pain, heart racing. I shoved my feet into my shoes and reached for my jacket. I'm on my way, I told her. Then I ended the call. The drive to Ridgeview General took 15 minutes, though it felt longer. Rain slicked the roads, turning every streetlight into a blurry smear across the windshield. My truck's wipers beat a steady rhythm as my mind raced ahead of the engine. David had drunk from the bottle. 1 glass, maybe 2. And now he was in the hospital. Dominic had sent that bottle. The facts didn't quite align yet, but something beneath them was beginning to take shape, a pattern forming just beyond the edges of certainty. I pulled into the hospital parking lot a little after 10 and jogged toward the entrance. Inside, the fluorescent lights hit me like a slap. The emergency room was too bright, too sterile, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and burnt coffee. Margaret Whitmore stood near the nurse's station, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her face looked drained of color. She saw me and hurried across the waiting room. Edgar, she said, her voice breaking. They won't tell me anything. What happened? I asked. We were watching television, she said, her words trembling. David said he felt dizzy. Then he grabbed his chest and said his heart was racing. I called 911. Was he conscious when they brought him in? He was. But they took him back about an hour ago. A nurse passed by and I stepped forward to stop her. Excuse me, I said. David Whitmore. He came in about an hour ago. Cardiac symptoms. Do you know anything? The nurse glanced at the clipboard in her hands. Are you family? I'm his wife? Margaret said quickly. The nurse nodded once. The doctor will update you shortly. Right now, Mr. Whitmore is stable, but we're running a full toxicology screen. Toxicology, Margaret whispered. Standard procedure, the nurse explained. Rapid heart rate arrhythmia and no known cardiac history. We have to rule out contamination. Contamination. Not poisoned. Not yet, but close enough. The nurse disappeared through the double doors. Margaret sank into a plastic chair, her shoulders shaking slightly. I stayed standing watching the entrance. That's when I noticed the uniform. Officer Patel stepped through the automatic doors, rainwater still clinging to his jacket. He already had a notebook in his hand. I recognized him immediately. Young officer, sharp eyes, the kind who paid attention. He walked directly toward me. Mr. Drake, he said. Officer, I need to ask you a few questions. Go ahead. You saw Mr. Whitmore earlier today. Around 4, I said. At his office. Patel opened his notebook and flipped to a fresh page. Did you give Mr. Whitmore anything today? Food, drink, or any other item? I kept my voice calm. I gave him a bottle of vodka, a gift. Patel's pen paused mid-air. A gift. Expensive bottle, I said. $3,800. I figured he'd earned it after 30 years of putting up with my paperwork. Did you drink any of it? No. Why not? I'm on heart medication, I said. Alcohol and those pills don't mix. Patel wrote that down. And Mr. Whitmore drank from the bottle. He had a glass, I said. Maybe 2. Do you still have the bottle? No. I left it with him. Patel nodded once and closed his notebook. We'll collect it as evidence. Then he looked directly at me. And Mr. Drake, don't leave town for the next few days. The words landed hard. You think I did this? You gave Mr. Whitmore alcohol, Patel said evenly, and now he's in the emergency room with symptoms consistent with ingestion of a toxic substance. He slipped the notebook into his pocket. Right now, you're a person of interest. Person of interest. Police language for suspect we can't arrest yet. I wanted to explain everything: Dominic, the forged will, the suspicious bottle that had arrived out of nowhere. But I'd spent too many years on the other side of these conversations. I knew exactly how this looked. Man gives lawyer expensive bottle. Lawyer ends up in the hospital. Man claims he didn't drink any himself. It looked bad. I'll be around, I said quietly. Patel nodded once and walked away. I sat beside Margaret and waited. The emergency room doctor appeared just before midnight. He looked young and exhausted. His scrubs wrinkled his eyes, ringed with fatigue. Mr. Whitmore is stable, he said. Margaret let out a shaky breath. We've managed to control his heart rate. Toxicology results will take another day or 2. For now, we're moving him to the ICU for observation. Can I see him? Margaret asked. Yes, the doctor said gently. She followed him through the double doors without another word. I stayed another hour in the waiting room, but there was nothing else I could do. No new information. No answers. Eventually, I stood and left. Outside, the streets glistened under the streetlights. Rain had begun again, turning the pavement into mirrors. I drove home without really remembering the route. Autopilot. When I stepped inside, the house felt colder than usual. I didn't bother turning on the heat. Instead, I walked into the kitchen and sat at the table, the same table where I had opened that box earlier that morning. The same table where the crystal bottle had rested glowing amber in the sunlight. I opened a drawer and pulled out a small spiral notebook, the kind I used to carry during investigations. I flipped to the first blank page. Then I wrote, October 12th, 2024, 1:30 a.m. David drank the vodka I gave him. Now he's in the hospital. The police think I did it. They took the bottle as evidence. They told me not to leave town. I paused, then added another line. But Dominic sent that bottle. Dominic, who hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. Dominic, who forged my will and hacked David's system. I stared at the final word. Coincidence. The question lingered on the page. After a while, I closed the notebook, turned off the kitchen light, and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that bottle again. Crystal edges, amber light, Dominic's handwriting on the card. I saw David lifting the glass, taking the first sip. Smiling. Smooth, he'd said. Really smooth. And now he was lying in the ICU. I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling. Rain tapped against the window like quiet fingernails. Somewhere in Portland, Dominic was probably asleep in his condo. Or maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was awake too. Maybe he was wondering if his plan had worked. If I had drunk from that bottle. If I was the one lying in the hospital bed instead of David. The thought settled in my stomach like a stone. The next day dragged by slowly. I stayed home, ignored the phone, tried to keep myself busy. I changed the oil in my truck, tightened the loose hinge on the kitchen cabinet. Anything to keep my hands moving. Anything to stop my mind from circling back to that bottle, that hospital, and the look in Officer Patel's eyes. Person of interest. I was in the garage wiping grease from my hands with a rag when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. Frank Miller, my old partner, 25 years on the Ridgeview force together. He had retired 3 years before I did. Last I heard, he'd taken a job as a detective with the county sheriff's office. We hadn't spoken in months. I answered. Edgar. Frank's voice came through the phone. Familiar, but not warm. Not the way it used to be. Frank, I said. A pause. Then he spoke again. We need to talk. I wiped the grease off my hands, grabbed my jacket, and headed downtown. The Ridgeview Police Department sat on the corner of 3rd and Elm, a squat brick building unchanged since I'd walked through its doors as a rookie 40 years ago. The parking lot was half empty when I pulled in. I'd been on the other side of this plenty of times, bringing people in, asking questions, watching them sweat under fluorescent lights. I'd never thought I'd be the one answering for something I didn't do. But here I was. I walked through the front doors. The desk sergeant nodded toward the hallway. Detective Miller's expecting you. 3rd door on the left. The hallway smelled the same. Old coffee floor wax, the faint tang of sweat and stress. I reached the 3rd door, knocked twice, and pushed it open. Frank sat behind a gray metal desk, reading glasses on his nose, a file folder open. He looked up, and for a second I saw the man I'd worked with for 2 decades. Steady, reliable. But then his expression shifted into something more official. Edgar, sit down. I pulled out the chair. The room was small, windowless. A recorder sat on the desk between us, red light already blinking. You're recording this. Standard procedure, you know how it works. I did. Standard procedure meant they were building a case. Frank leaned back. Toxicology came back on the vodka you gave David Whitmore. I waited. Aconitine. Ever heard of it? No. It's a toxin. Comes from a plant called wolfsbane, one of the most lethal plant-based substances known to man. Causes cardiac arrhythmia, respiratory failure, can stop a heart in under an hour. The words landed heavy. My gut twisted. The bottle you gave David had enough aconitine to kill someone. David's alive because he only drank about 50 milliliters. If he'd finished the glass, we'd be having a very different conversation. I swallowed. I didn't know. I believe you. But I need you to help me understand how a bottle of $3,800 vodka ended up laced with poison and in your hands. I met his eyes. Dominic sent it to me. Frank's expression didn't change, but I saw the flicker of interest. Your son, my son, who I haven't heard from in 3 years, who sent me that bottle on my birthday out of nowhere with a card saying, "Hope this makes up for lost time. Do you still have the card, the box?" "Yeah, at my house." Frank nodded, made a note. "We'll need those. Handwriting analysis, fingerprints, anything that ties Dominic to the bottle." "You'll have them." Frank leaned forward. "Edgar, I've known you a long time. I know you didn't try to harm David, but right now the evidence says you gave him a contaminated bottle. That makes you a suspect. What I need is proof that someone else is responsible. And if that someone is Dominic, I need a motive." I took a breath. "David told me something before he drank from that bottle. He found discrepancies in my will. 3 versions. One in his safe, one digital, one sent via email. The digital and email versions were forged. Someone hacked his system, changed my estate plan to leave everything to Dominic." Frank's pen stopped moving. "David said this right before he opened the bottle. He said we needed to call IT, have them trace the access." Frank picked up his phone, dialed. A brief conversation. He hung up and looked at me. "Margaret confirmed it. David told her the same thing before he lost consciousness. Said your will had been tampered with. Dominic. We're looking into it. But Edgar, even if Dominic forged your will, that doesn't prove he sent the vodka. We need a direct connection. Check the FedEx tracking, the sender address. Dominic's condo in Portland." Frank made another note. "We will." He closed the file but didn't stand. "Edgar, there's something else. You said you didn't drink from the bottle because you're on heart medication." "What medication?" "Nitroglycerin. For blood pressure. Why?" "When's the last time you took it?" "Mas 2 days ago." "Morning. Why?" Frank's jaw tightened. "I want you to have your doctor check that prescription. Make sure it's what it's supposed to be." The implication hit me. You think Dominic tampered with my meds?" I think if Dominic sent you a bottle laced with poison, he's not above switching out your pills." I stood. "I'll call Dr. Brennan." Frank walked me to the door. "Get me those boxes, the card, anything Dominic touched. And Edgar, be careful. If your son's behind this, you're still a target." I left the station, climbed into my truck, and sat there with the engine running. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From anger. I pulled out my phone and called Dr. Brennan. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Edgar, what can I do for you? I need you to test my nitroglycerin prescription. Check if it's been tampered with." A pause. "Why?" "Just do it, please." "All right. Bring the bottle by my office. I'll run a sample through the lab." I drove home, grabbed the pill bottle from the bathroom cabinet, and drove straight to Brennan's clinic. He took the bottle and disappeared into the back. I sat in the waiting room, staring at a cholesterol poster, trying to figure out when it had all gone wrong with Dominic. Brennan came back an hour later, face grim. "Edgar, this isn't nitroglycerin." I stood. "What is it?" "Calcium channel blocker. Different class entirely. If you'd taken this during a cardiac episode, it would have dropped your blood pressure dangerously low. You could have lost consciousness. Maybe worse." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the chair. "Someone switched your medication." Brennan nodded. "I'm prescribing you a new bottle. Real nitroglycerin. Don't take anything from that old container. And Edgar, you need to tell the police." I called Frank from the parking lot. Told him what Brennan had found. Frank said he'd send someone to collect the fake pills as evidence. I drove home in a fog, walked inside. The house felt colder than it should have. I sat at the kitchen table, pulled out my notebook and wrote, October 14th, 2024, 6 p.m. Frank confirmed the vodka was laced with aconitine. Lethal dose. David survived because he only drank 50 milliliters. Dominic sent that bottle. Dominic forged my will. Dominic hacked David's system. And now I know. Dominic switched my heart medication. He didn't just want to harm David. He wanted to kill me. But why? I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I closed the notebook and sat in the silence. The phone rang just after 7 the next evening. I was heating up leftover soup when the screen lit up. Unknown number. Portland area code, I answered. Silence on the other end. Then quiet and calm, a voice I hadn't heard in 3 years. Dad, did you like my gift? My finger hit the record button before I even registered the movement. Old instinct. 25 years on the force had taught me to document everything, especially when something felt wrong. And this, Dominic's voice after 3 years of silence asking if I'd liked his gift, felt very wrong. I kept my tone neutral. Dominic, you didn't answer my question. I set the soup pot down, moved to the living room where the signal was clearer. No, I didn't drink it. A pause. Brief, but I heard it. The kind that comes when someone's recalculating. Why not? I'm on medication. Can't mix it with alcohol. You'd know that if you'd bothered to call in the past 3 years. The words came out sharper than intended, but I didn't take them back. Another pause. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted. Less casual, more measured. So what did you do with it? I gave it to a friend. Silence. 3 full seconds of it. Then Dominic's voice came back sharper now. Careful. Which friend? And there it was. Dominic hadn't asked which friend before. He'd asked what I'd done with it. But now suddenly he needed to know who. That wasn't curiosity. That was panic. I didn't answer right away. Let the question hang there. Why do you ask? Just curious, Dad. That bottle cost me a lot. I'd hate for it to go to waste. Too deliberate. Too interested. If Dominic had really just sent an expensive gift, he wouldn't care where it ended up. But he did care. Which meant he knew. He appreciated it. I said, keeping my voice even. Good. That's good. I hope he enjoyed every drop. The words landed cold, not warm, not friendly. Then the line went dead. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, staring at the darkened window. My mind was running at full speed, piecing together what I'd just heard. Dominic hadn't asked who the friend was until I said I'd given the bottle away. That pause, those 3 seconds of silence, that had been surprise. Maybe shock. And then the follow-up question carefully phrased, which friend? Dominic knew someone had drunk from that bottle. Maybe he'd seen it in the news. Ridgeview was small enough that a prominent lawyer in the ER would have made the local paper. Or maybe Dominic had other ways of knowing. Either way, Dominic knew. And he knew it wasn't me. I pulled up Frank Miller's contact and hit dial. He answered on the second ring. Edgar, what's wrong? Dominic just called. A beat of silence. Your son? Yeah. Asked if I liked the gift. Asked if I'd drunk from the bottle. When I told him I gave it to a friend, he went quiet for 3 seconds. Then he asked which friend. What did you tell him? Nothing. But Frank, he knows. He knows someone drank from it, and he knows it wasn't me. And did you record the call? Every word. Send it to me, right now. I hung up, pulled up the recording file, attached it to an email, and hit send. Then I set the phone down on the counter and stood there, hands flat against the cold tile, breathing slow and steady. Dominic had called. After 3 years of silence, after sending poison, after forging my will and hacking David's law firm, Dominic had called to check if his plan had worked. And when he found out it hadn't, when he realized I was still alive, he'd wanted to know who'd taken my place. This wasn't over. I moved through the house, methodically checking every window latch, every door lock. Everything was secure. But secure didn't mean safe. I needed to know if someone tried to get in. In the garage, I found an old spool of black thread tucked in Kate's sewing kit. Thin, strong. I cut a piece about 2 feet long, carried it to the front door, and stretched it across the threshold at ankle height. I tied one end to the doorknob, pulled it taut, and tied the other end to the coat rack just inside the entryway. tight enough to hold tension, loose enough to snap if someone pushed the door open even an inch. Old detective trick. Simple, effective. Then I grabbed the security camera I'd bought 2 years ago and never installed. Motion activated, but I'd never even put batteries in it. But it looked real enough from a distance. Black casing, little red light lens pointed outward. I peeled off the backing and stuck it in the corner of the porch overhang angled toward the driveway. If someone came looking, they'd see it, and they'd think I was watching. By the time I finished, the sun had set completely. The street was dark, except for the glow of the streetlight 2 houses down. I stood on my porch, scanning the shadows between the trees, looking for movement. Nothing. I went inside, locked the door, and made coffee I didn't really want. Sat at the kitchen table. The facts were clear enough. Dominic had sent poison. Dominic had called to see if it worked. Dominic knew it hadn't. And sooner or later, Dominic would try again. I finished the coffee, rinsed the cup, and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the house, settling, every branch scraping against the siding, pulled me halfway back to waking. I kept my phone on the nightstand, volume up, one ear, always listening for the sound of a door opening, the snap of thread, breaking footsteps crossing my living room floor. But nothing came. When dawn broke gray and cold through my window, I was already awake. I swung my legs out of bed, pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt, and padded barefoot down the hallway to the front door. The thread was gone. Not just broken. Gone. Snapped clean in the middle, both ends dangling loose. One still tied to the doorknob, the other hanging limp from the coat rack. Someone had opened my front door, stepped inside, and left. I turned, slowly, looked out through the window at the porch. The camera was still there, mounted in the corner, but it had been moved, just a few degrees to the left, angled away from the driveway, now pointing at nothing. Whoever had come in last night had known exactly what to look for. I stood there in the doorway, cold October air rolling in around my bare feet, and stared at that broken thread swaying gently in the breeze. Dominic hadn't just called to check on me. He'd sent someone to finish what the vodka hadn't. I didn't touch the thread. Old instincts surfaced before conscious thought could interfere. The first rule of preserving a scene, whether it was a burglary, a break-in, or something worse, was simple: don't contaminate it. I stepped back from the doorway, slowly, careful not to disturb anything near the frame. The thin black thread I had stretched across the entrance the night before now hung broken one end, still clinging to the nail where I'd tied it. Someone had walked through that door. Quietly, deliberately. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed Frank Miller. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Edgar. It's 6 in the morning. Someone broke into my house last night." There was a pause. I heard rustling on the other end of the line sheets, shifting a mattress, creaking as Frank sat upright. "You sure I set a tripwire?" I said. Black thread across the door frame. It snapped clean. Another pause. "And the camera I mounted on the porch," I added, "has been moved. It's angled away from the driveway now." "You hurt?" "No," I said. "Whoever it was came in and left. Didn't take anything." "Then why break in?" I stared down the hallway toward the living room. Just wanted me to know they could. Frank exhaled slowly. "I'll be there in 2 hours," he said. "Don't touch anything." I know the drill. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Then I stood in the hallway and studied the house. At first glance, nothing seemed wrong. The living room looked exactly as it had the night before. Couch cushions were undisturbed. The television remote still sat on the coffee table. Kate's quilt remained folded neatly across the arm of her old reading chair. Nothing missing. Nothing moved. But someone had been here. Walking through my home while I slept down the hall, I moved slowly from room to room, checking everything, the way I had done hundreds of times during my career. The kitchen was clean, dishes still drying on the rack, bathroom towel hanging exactly where I left it. Bedroom bed, unmade closet door, half open. Garage truck keys on the hook. Toolbox untouched. Whoever had entered hadn't come to steal anything. They'd come to look, or to make a point. We can reach you whenever we want. I crouched beside the front door and examined the lock. No scratches, no splintered wood, no signs of forced entry. That meant one of two things. Either the intruder had picked the lock, something that wasn't particularly difficult with a deadbolt this old, or they had a key. That thought settled cold and heavy in my stomach. I stood up and went into the kitchen. Coffee seemed like the only logical response. I brewed it strong and black poured a mug and sat at the table watching the clock creep toward 8. Frank's unmarked sedan rolled into my driveway a little after 8. I opened the door before he knocked. He stepped inside and immediately noticed the thread. "Don't touch it," I said. Frank crouched down anyway, careful not to disturb anything. He pulled a small flashlight from his jacket and swept the beam across the floor. "No footprints," he said. "Ground's too dry." "Cameras outside," I said. "Show me." We stepped onto the porch. Frank examined the adhesive mount and the position of the camera lens. "Moved deliberately," he said. "Meaning this wasn't some bored teenager," he said. "Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Professional or experienced?" He straightened and met my eyes. "Could be Dominic hired someone," he added. "Could be Dominic himself, though I doubt it. Why he doesn't strike me as the hands-on type." Frank walked back toward his car and pulled a file folder from the passenger seat. "You sent me that recording," he said, the phone call from Dominic. "Yeah. I've listened to it 3 times. He opened the folder. "That pause after you told him you gave the bottle to a friend," Frank said. "That's not curiosity. What is it, panic?" I nodded. I thought the same thing. And the follow-up question, Frank continued. "Which friend?" He shook his head. "That's Dominic trying to figure out whether his plan worked." Frank reached into the folder and removed 2 plastic evidence sleeves. Inside one was the birthday card Dominic had sent. Inside the other was a photocopy of an old tax return with Dominic's signature. "Forensic document examiner looked at both," Frank said. 97% match. "Same slant," he continued. "Same pressure patterns. Same loops in the letters." He tapped the plastic bag. "Dominic wrote that card." Relief moved through me like a slow exhale. Now it was official. Documented. "David woke up yesterday afternoon," Frank said. "Margaret told me. He spoke with her first, then with us." Frank flipped another page in the file. "He confirmed everything. You gave him the vodka as a gift. You 2 were reviewing your will." He drank from the bottle. "And I left before he collapsed." "Exactly." Frank nodded. He also remembers the conversation about the forged documents. "So I'm clear," I said. "Officially," Frank said. "Yes." He closed the file. "We're building a case against Dominic for what Frank counted on his fingers. Attempted harm, fraud, computer crimes, identity theft. IT Forensics has been digging through the law firm's server," he continued. "Early results show unauthorized remote access from an IP address in Portland. How old employee login that should have been deactivated months ago. Dominic. That's the working theory." Frank tucked the folder back into his car. "We're tracing the IP address to a physical location," he said. "Should have it by the end of the day." He looked at me carefully. "Edgar, I'm putting patrols on your street. Uniforms, just drive-bys," he said. "Twice a night." Then he added quietly, "And do me a favor. What upgrade your security?" He gestured toward the broken thread. "That's clever," he said. "But it's not stopping anyone determined. Get a real alarm system. Change your locks." I already planned on it. Frank left just before 10. He took the broken thread. The birthday card, the FedEx box, and the bottle of fake medication. I watched his sedan disappear down the road before going back inside. My first stop was the hardware store. I bought a basic alarm system, motion sensors, door contacts, window sensors, and a small keypad control panel. Nothing fancy, $50, self-install. I also grabbed new deadbolts and reinforced strike plates. By the time I got home, it was nearly noon. I spent the next 3 hours installing everything. Sensors on both doors, motion detector in the hallway, keypad mounted beside the front entrance, new deadbolts drilled deep into the door frames. When I finished, I armed the system and opened the front door. The alarm exploded into a high-pitched scream, loud enough to make my ears ring. I punched in the code. Silence. Good enough. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my notebook. October 16th, 2024, 3 p.m. Someone broke in last night. Thread snapped. Camera moved. Frank confirmed I'm officially clear. Handwriting matches Dominic. David woke up and confirmed my story. IT forensics found a hack traced to a Portland IP. I paused, then wrote one final line. Dominic isn't just trying to steal my estate. He's making sure I don't live long enough to stop him. I closed the notebook. Tomorrow I would call a professional locksmith. Tomorrow I would talk to Frank about restraining orders. But tonight I just needed sleep. I didn't get it. The next morning I woke before dawn. I made coffee, sat at the table, watched the sky fade from black to gray. Just after 9, I walked to the front door to grab the newspaper. There was an envelope on the porch. Plain white. No address, no stamp, no name. Just sitting on the welcome mat. I stared at it for a long moment, then pulled out my phone, took a photo, and called Frank Miller. The envelope lay exactly where I had placed it, its sharp edges resting against the smooth surface of the kitchen counter. Pale morning light filtered through the window above the sink, stretching long shadows across the room as I slid a finger carefully beneath the flap. Inside was a single photograph, black and white, grainy, printed on cheap matte paper. I pulled it out and held it up to the light. It was my house. The image had been taken from the gravel driveway, angled slightly upward, so the entire front porch and the row of windows were framed beneath the skeletal branches of the old maple tree. The house looked darker in the photograph than it ever did in daylight, the siding pale and ghost-like, the shadows stretching long across the yard. In the bottom right corner were white digital numbers. 11:47 p.m. October 16th, 2024, last night. An hour and a half after I had locked every door and installed the new motion sensor, I turned the photograph over. Nothing. No note, no handwriting, no signature. Just the silent image of my home captured by someone who had stood outside in the dark while I slept inside. My fingers tightened against the counter. For 30 years, I had been the one holding the camera, documenting crime scenes, gathering evidence, preserving moments that would later be dissected in courtrooms. Now the roles had reversed. Now I was the subject, the target. I pulled out my phone and dialed Frank Miller. He answered after several rings. Edgar, his voice was still thick with sleep. "Check your email," I said. "I'm scanning something now." "What is it?" "A photograph. My house." There was a brief silence. Timestamp says 11:47 last night. The line went quiet for another second. "You're telling me someone walked onto your property an hour after you installed that alarm?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." "Did the sensor trigger no?" Another pause. "I'll be there in 40 minutes, Frank said. Don't touch the envelope." I set the phone down and looked at the photograph again. The framing was deliberate, not a careless snapshot. Whoever took it had composed the shot, carefully balancing the porch, the tree, the darkness of the windows. The kind of framing a photographer would use, or someone trained by one. A memory stirred. Dominic had been 12 the summer I taught him to use my old Nikon camera. We had spent weeks hiking the hills east of Ridgeview, crouching in the brush, while I explained how to adjust the aperture for low light. He'd listened carefully, focused, patient. That boy no longer existed. In his place was a man who sent poisoned vodka to his father, a man who forged legal documents, a man who replaced life-saving medication with something deadly, and now a man or someone working for him who stood in my driveway in the middle of the night and took photographs of my house. By 10:30, Frank had taken the photograph and the envelope, sealing both inside evidence bags before leaving. The house felt quiet again after he drove away. Too quiet. I stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing my coffee mug, when the pain struck. It arrived suddenly, a crushing pressure across my chest, heavy and suffocating. The pain spread down my left arm like liquid fire. I grabbed the counter, gasping. My vision blurred. Nitroglycerin. I needed nitroglycerin. My jacket hung beside the front door. I staggered toward it, each step slow and clumsy. My lungs refused to pull in a full breath. My hand slipped into the pocket and found the small brown prescription bottle. My fingers twisted the cap. Then I froze. Dr. Brennan's voice echoed in my mind. The pills in your bottle were fake. If you had taken one during an episode... I set the bottle down on the counter. Instead, I pulled out my phone and dialed. "Dr. Brennan," I said when he answered. "It's Edgar Drake." Edgar, his voice sharpened instantly. "What's wrong?" "Chest pain," I said, struggling for air. "Bad. I can't take the pills." "They might be. Don't take anything," he said quickly. "I'm on my way. Sit down and stay on the line." I lowered myself into the kitchen chair, pressing the phone against my ear. The pain pulsed through my chest with every heartbeat. I forced myself to breathe slowly. In, out, in, out. "Still there?" Edgar Brennan asked. "Yeah." "Good," he said. "I'm turning onto your street now." Dr. Brennan arrived shortly before 11. He entered the kitchen, carrying a black medical bag, his gray hair disheveled from the drive. He knelt beside my chair and pressed 2 fingers against my wrist, counting silently. "Pulse is elevated," he said, "but steady." He reached into his bag and handed me a small white tablet and a glass of water. "This is sublingual nitroglycerin," he said, "fresh from the hospital pharmacy this morning. Put it under your tongue." I obeyed. The tablet tasted bitter. Within seconds, the tight band around my chest began to loosen. The pressure eased. My breathing returned slowly. "Better?" Brennan asked. I nodded. He pulled a chair across from me and placed a clear plastic evidence bag on the table. Inside it was the brown prescription bottle I had carried for 3 months. "The lab confirmed it yesterday," he said quietly. "Amlodipine, a calcium channel blocker." I stared at the bottle. "If you had taken one of these during acute angina," Brennan continued, "your blood pressure would have dropped rapidly. Your brain wouldn't have received enough oxygen. You would have lost consciousness in under 2 minutes. He paused. "At your age, with your medical history..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Who would swap my medication?" I asked. But I already knew the answer. Brennan spoke gently. "Someone who had access to your home. Someone who knew about your heart condition. Someone who wanted it to appear natural." Dominic. Dr. Brennan wrote a prescription for a new 90-day supply and showed me the tamper-proof seal on the replacement bottle. Before leaving, he made me promise to call emergency services if the pain returned. After he left the house, felt silent again. I opened my notebook and began to write. October 17th, 2024, 11:45 a.m. This morning, I received a photograph of my house. Timestamp 11:47 p.m. last night. At 10:30, I suffered a severe angina attack. I reached for my nitroglycerin, but remembered Dr. Brennan's warning. Lab results confirm the pills were amlodipine. If I had taken one, I might not have survived. I paused before writing the final line. Dominic planned this. The poisoned vodka, the forged will, the replaced medication. He is making sure I do not live long enough to stop him. I closed the notebook and drank another glass of water. I tried to convince myself the new locks and alarm system would be enough. They weren't. At 2:34 a.m. that night, I woke to the sound of footsteps. Not outside, inside the house. Slow, deliberate, moving through the living room toward the hallway, where my bedroom door stood slightly open. I lay perfectly still beneath the quilt, listening. The alarm system remained silent. No beeping, no siren, nothing. I reached slowly for my phone on the nightstand. The footsteps stopped. A shadow slid across the narrow gap beneath my bedroom door. Then a voice spoke quietly from the other side. Low, unfamiliar. Mr. Drake, it said. We need to talk. I kept my service revolver in the nightstand drawer, a Smith & Wesson Model 10, that had ridden on my hip for 23 years while I worked patrol and homicide for Ridgeview PD. My hand found it easily in the dark fingers wrapping around the familiar grip. The steel felt cool and steady in my palm as I eased out of bed. Kate's quilt slipped quietly from my shoulders as I moved toward the bedroom door. Every step was deliberate, careful. The old instincts were still there, wired into muscle memory after decades on the job. My bare feet touched the floorboards lightly, avoiding the spots that creaked. The voice had come from downstairs. Calm, patient. Not the frantic voice of a burglar who'd been caught in the act. Whoever it was sounded composed, almost conversational, like someone who believed he had every right to be there. I opened the bedroom door slowly and stepped into the hallway, my back pressing against the wall as I raised the revolver. A faint glow from the kitchen nightlight spilled across the hardwood floor below. I moved down the staircase step by step, keeping to the outer edge of each tread where the wood was strongest. My breathing stayed slow and controlled. At the bottom, I paused, listening. The living room stretched out to my left. Moonlight filtered through the front windows, turning the furniture into pale silhouettes. Someone was sitting on my couch. The figure was perfectly still, hands resting on his knees, posture relaxed, almost casual. I reached around the corner and flipped the wall switch. The overhead light flooded the room. The man on my sofa didn't flinch. He looked to be in his mid-40s, compact and solidly built. A black leather jacket hung loosely over dark jeans. His hair was slicked back, streaked with gray at the temples. He slowly raised both hands, palms open. "Easy, detective," he said. His voice carried the faint trace of a Brooklyn accent. "I'm not here to hurt you. Think of this as professional courtesy." I kept the revolver pointed at the center of his chest. "Who are you, Vincent Russo?" he replied calmly. "Most people call me Vinny." He glanced toward the coffee table between us. "Mind if I lower my hands? My shoulders aren't what they used to be. Leave them up." He nodded slightly. "Fair enough." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he spoke again. "You're probably wondering why I'm sitting in your living room at 2:30 in the morning. That would be a good place to start." "All right," he said. "Here's the short version." He shifted slightly but kept his hands raised. "Your son owes my employers $300,000. The number hit me like a punch." "What gambling debts?" Vinny said calmly. Mostly poker, some sports betting on the side. He tilted his head slightly. Dominic's been playing at a private club in Portland for about 18 months. My grip tightened on the revolver. He's good, Vinny continued. I'll give him that. Smart player. Cool under pressure? He shrugged. Just not good enough. By June, he was down $250,000. By August, 300 even. I lowered the revolver slightly as my mind tried to catch up. Dominic. Gambling. $300,000. What does that have to do with me? I asked. Vinny's expression didn't change. Your son needed collateral. He leaned forward slightly. He offered a life insurance policy. My stomach dropped. $500,000, he said. The beneficiary listed on the policy is Dominic Locke. The room seemed to tilt. He told my employers you were in poor health. Vinny continued. Said it wouldn't be long before the policy paid out. They agreed to extend his deadline. I gripped the doorframe with my free hand. You're telling me my son used my life insurance to cover his debts? That's exactly what I'm telling you. Vinny lowered his hands slowly and rested them on his knees. And when you didn't cooperate by dying on schedule. Dominic decided to speed things up. He ticked off the list calmly. The vodka, the fake heart medication, the forged will, he shrugged. Not really my style, if I'm being honest. Too messy. Too many moving parts. But desperate men do desperate things. I stared at him, the words echoing in my head. My son, my own son, betting on my death. Why are you here? I asked finally. Because I'm done cleaning up your son's mess. Vinny stood slowly from the couch. I don't touch cops, he said. Never have. That's an old rule where I come from. And I don't break old rules. When I found out you were Ridgeview PD, I told my employers I was stepping away from the situation. They weren't thrilled, he admitted, but they know better than to push. He reached slowly into his jacket pocket. My revolver rose again instantly. Easy, he said. He pulled out a business card and placed it gently on the coffee table. You're going to need proof. Names, dates, transactions. I can't testify in court, he said, but I can point you in the right direction. He nodded toward the card. Dominic signed documents. He made calls. If you follow the trail, it's all there. Why help me? I asked. Vinny walked toward the hallway leading to the kitchen. Before stepping through, he paused and looked back. Because Dominic's plan put me in a bad position. I don't like bad positions. He hesitated. And because you remind me of my old man, retired cop, heart condition, too stubborn to quit. He gave a faint smile. He deserved better than what he got. So do you. He gestured toward the front door. You're probably wondering why your alarm system didn't go off. I glanced toward the motion sensor above the doorway. The green indicator light was dark. I cut the external power line before I came in, Vinny said casually. Took about 30 seconds with a pair of wire cutters. Then I used a signal jammer. $200 online. He shrugged. That $50 alarm system you installed. It's a toy. If you want real security, call a professional. He walked into the kitchen and stopped beside the rear window overlooking the woods. I followed cautiously, revolver lowered, but still ready. He pointed at the glass. Glass cutter. Removed the pane. Reached inside and released the latch. He pushed the window open slightly. Put the glass back after I came through. You wouldn't notice unless you knew exactly where to look. One leg swung over the sill. Good luck with your son, Mr. Drake, he said quietly. You're going to need it. Then he disappeared into the darkness beyond the trees. I locked the window immediately and checked every door in the house twice. Then I poured a glass of whiskey. I didn't drink it. At 3:15, I called Frank Miller and left a detailed voicemail describing Vinny's visit. At 4 in the morning, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my journal. My handwriting shook slightly as I wrote. October 18th, 2024, 4 a.m. Vincent Russo, connected to organized crime, entered my home tonight. He confirmed that Dominic owes $300,000 in gambling debts. Dominic used my $500,000 life insurance policy as collateral. His motive is now clear. He needs me dead in order to collect the insurance and pay his debts. I closed the notebook and sat quietly while the sky outside shifted slowly from black to gray. At 6:30, my phone rang. Frank. His voice was tight with controlled anger. By 7, he was standing at my front door with 2 uniformed officers and a forensic kit. They worked the house for hours. By noon, we had a warrant. 2 days later, on October 20th, I sat in my study reviewing the bank records Frank had subpoenaed. Lines of transactions stretched across the page, withdrawals, transfers, payments to accounts I didn't recognize. My phone buzzed suddenly. A video call. Sadie. My chest tightened when I saw her name. But this time it wasn't pain. It was relief. I answered. The screen filled with my granddaughter's face, blonde hair tied back in a ponytail, bright blue eyes shining. "Grandpa," she said excitedly. "You answered." Her face filled the screen, bright and unguarded the way only a 10-year-old's can be. Blonde hair pulled back in a high ponytail, a gap where her left front tooth used to be freckles scattered across her nose. Sadie, my granddaughter. The one pure thing left in this mess. "Grandpa," she said again, her grin widening. "I thought you weren't going to pick up." I forced a smile, settling back into my desk chair. "I always pick up for you, sweetheart." "How's school?" "Boring." She rolled her eyes. "Mrs. Henderson makes us do multiplication tables every single day. I already know them." "Multiplication's important," I said. "You'll need it when you're older." "That's what Mom says." Sadie leaned closer to the camera, lowering her voice to a whisper. "But I think she just doesn't want to help me with homework." I chuckled, the sound hollow in my chest. "Where is your mom?" "Upstairs. She's on the phone with somebody. She's been on the phone a lot lately." Sadie tilted her head. "Grandpa, when are you coming to visit? You promised you'd take me to the zoo before it gets too cold." The zoo. I'd promised her that back in July before everything started unraveling. "Soon," I said, hating the lie. "I've been a little busy, but I'll come see you soon. You always say that." She pouted, then brightened. "Dad says we're going to be rich soon. Maybe we can go to the big zoo in Seattle instead, the one with the pandas." The words hit me like ice water. I kept my expression neutral. "Your dad said that..." "Yeah, he's been really happy lately. He keeps saying things are going to get better, that we won't have to worry about money anymore." Sadie twirled a strand of hair around her finger. "He talks to somebody named Vinny a lot. Like every day." "Is Vinny your friend?" My throat closed. I swallowed hard. "No, sweetheart. Vinny's not my friend." "Why do you ask?" "Because Dad mentions you when he talks to Vinny. He locks himself in his office and talks really quiet, but I heard him say your name once. And something about insurance." She wrinkled her nose. "What's insurance?" I closed my eyes for a breath, trying to steady the roar in my ears. "Insurance is... It's something grown-ups have to make sure their families are taken care of. It's complicated." "Oh." She shrugged, already losing interest. "Dad says a lot of complicated stuff lately. Mom gets mad at him sometimes. I heard them fighting last week." "About what?" Sadie hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. When she turned back, her voice was quieter. "I don't know. But Mom was crying. She said something about how she didn't sign up for this." and Dad said she needed to trust him, that everything would work out. I wanted to reach through the screen and pull her out of that house away from Dominic. But all I could do was sit 300 miles away and listen. "Chakurdi," I said gently, "has your dad been acting strange, different than usual?" She thought for a moment, chewing her bottom lip. "Kind of. He's gone a lot. And when he's home, he's always on his phone or in his office. He used to play board games with me on Saturdays, but he hasn't done that in forever." Her eyes brightened. "But he bought me a new iPad last month. He said it was an early birthday present. An early birthday present. Paid for with borrowed money, or money he expected to collect once I was gone." "That's nice of him," I managed. "Yeah." Sadie leaned back. "Grandpa, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." "Dad told me not to talk to you about the Vinny stuff. He said it was private and I shouldn't mention it if you called." She bit her lip, looking guilty. "But I miss you, and I don't think secrets are good. Mom says secrets make people sick." "Your mother is right," I wanted to say. "Secrets rot from the inside out." Instead, I said, "I miss you too, sweetheart. And you can always talk to me about anything, okay? No matter what your dad says." She nodded, her smile returning. "Okay." We talked for another few minutes. About her friends at school, about the book she was reading, about the stray cat in their backyard. I let her chatter fill the silence. When Sarah called her name from upstairs, Sadie waved at the camera. "I have to go. Love you, Grandpa." "Love you too, Sadie." The screen went dark. I sat motionless for a long time, staring at the blank tablet. "Dad says we're going to be rich soon. He talks to somebody named Vinny a lot. He mentions you." Dominic hadn't just planned my death. He'd talked about it openly enough that a 10-year-old had picked up fragments. He'd locked himself in his office and made calls to Vinny Russo while his daughter played in the next room, negotiating the terms of his father's life insurance. I opened my journal and began to write. October 20th, 2024, 5 p.m. Sadie called today. She mentioned that Dominic has been telling her, "We're going to be rich soon," and that he frequently speaks with someone named Vinny. She overheard him mention my name and the word insurance. Dominic has instructed Sadie not to discuss this with me. Sarah has been arguing with Dominic. Sadie heard her mother crying last week. My son is using his own daughter as cover while he plans my elimination. I closed the notebook and called Frank Miller. He answered on the second ring. "Edgar, what is it?" "I just talked to Sadie. Dominic's been on the phone with Vinny Russo regularly. He's told Sadie they're going to be rich soon, and she overheard him mention my name and life insurance." A pause. Out of the mouths of babes. "Frank, we need to talk to Sarah. Alone. Away from Dominic." "Agreed. Can you set it up?" "I'll try." The next afternoon, I sat in a corner booth at the Brew Haven, a coffee shop 20 miles outside Ridgeview. The place smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon, and rain drummed against the windows. At 3 o'clock, the door opened and Sarah Locke stepped inside, shaking water from her coat, her dark hair plastered to her forehead. She saw me and froze. Then slowly she crossed the room and slid into the seat opposite mine. She looked smaller than I remembered, hunched in the booth seat, with her hands wrapped around a coffee mug she hadn't touched. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hair, usually swept up in a neat bun, hung loose around her shoulders, damp from the rain. Sarah had always carried herself with a kind of careful composure, the posture of a woman who'd learned early how to keep her guard up. Today, that composure was gone. "Thank you for coming," I said quietly. She nodded, her gaze fixed on the table between us. "I almost didn't." "I know." A waitress drifted past, refilling water glasses, and we both waited until she was out of earshot. The cafe hummed with low conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine, but our corner felt isolated, separate from the rest of the world. "Sarah." I began keeping my voice gentle. "Sadie called me 2 days ago. She told me some things. Things I don't think she understood." Sarah's jaw tightened. "What did she say?" That Dominic's been telling her you're all going to be rich soon. That he talks to someone named Vinny regularly. That she overheard him mention my name and life insurance. Her eyes closed. When she opened them again, they were wet. I told him to stop. I told him Sadie was too young to keep secrets, that she'd say something eventually. He wouldn't listen. How long have you known? She drew a shaky breath. About the debt, 6 months. I found an email on his laptop in April. He'd left it open. Careless, or maybe he wanted me to see it. A lawyer representing the Benedetti family. They were discussing payment terms for $300,000. She paused, wrapping her arms around herself. I confronted Dominic. He told me it was under control, that he had a plan, that I needed to trust him. And you believed him. I wanted to. Her voice broke on the last word. He's my husband, Sadie's father. I wanted to believe he wasn't stupid enough to borrow money from the mob. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table. Sarah, I need you to be very clear with me. Did you know about the vodka, about the fake heart medication? Her head snapped up, eyes wide. What? Someone sent me a bottle of vodka laced with aconitine, a poison. My lawyer drank it and nearly died. Someone also swapped my nitroglycerin pills with a different drug. If I'd taken one during a heart attack, I would have died within minutes. The color drained from her face. No, I didn't know. I swear to God, Edgar, I didn't know. Her hands shook so badly she had to set the mug down. Dominic told me he was working on refinancing. He said he had a business opportunity, that he just needed a few more months. He never said anything about... She stopped, pressing a hand to her mouth. I watched her carefully, searching for any sign of deception. I'd spent 2 decades reading people, learning to spot the micro-expressions that betrayed a lie. Sarah's shock looked genuine. When did Vinny start following you? I asked. July. I saw him outside Sadie's school twice in 1 week, then outside our apartment. I asked Dominic about it, and he admitted Vinny worked for the people he owed money to. He said they were just keeping tabs, making sure we didn't run. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. Dominic told me if I said anything to anyone, to you, to the police, to anyone, he'd leave. He said he'd disappear and we'd be stuck with the debt. That the Benedettis would come after me and Sadie to collect. The bastard had used his own wife and daughter as hostages. Sarah, I need you to testify. I need you to tell a prosecutor everything you just told me. The emails, Vinny, Dominic's threats. Without your testimony, we don't have enough to prove Dominic planned this. She stared at me, her expression torn between fear and something that looked like relief. If I testify what happens to me, I knew about the debt. I didn't report it. Doesn't that make me an accessory number? I kept my voice firm, steady. You were coerced. Dominic threatened to abandon you and Sadie. That's duress. A good prosecutor will understand that. But what if they don't? Oh, and then we'll make them understand. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. I'm going to call Detective Frank Miller. He's been working this case with me. He can arrange a meeting with the county prosecutor's office. We'll negotiate immunity for you, full immunity in exchange for your cooperation. You testify and you walk away clean. Her breath hitched. And Sadie. Or Sadie will be safe. That's the priority. Dominic won't be able to threaten either of you once he's in custody. Sarah stared at the phone for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. Do it. I dialed Frank's number. He picked up on the second ring. Edgar, tell me you've got good news. I'm at Maple Street Cafe with Sarah Locke. She's willing to testify. She knew about the debt and Vinny, but she didn't know about the vodka or the medication. Dominic threatened to leave her and Sadie if she talked. We need an immunity deal. A pause. Put her on speaker. I tapped the button. You're on, Frank. Mrs. Locke, this is Detective Frank Miller. Have you been in contact with your husband since agreeing to meet Mr. Drake today? Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. No. He thinks I'm visiting my sister in Eugene. Good. Keep it that way. I'm going to call the county prosecutor's office right now. Can you stay where you are for the next hour? Yes. All right, sit tight. I'll have an answer for you soon. The line went dead. Sarah exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging. What if Dominic finds out? He won't, I said, though I couldn't be certain. Frank's discreet. And once you're under witness protection, Dominic won't be able to touch you. She nodded, but the fear didn't leave her eyes. 2 days later, on the morning of October 23rd, Frank and I stood outside the offices of Whitmore and Associates. The building looked the same as it had 3 weeks ago. Red brick brass nameplate, the scent of old paper and lemon polish drifting through the open door. But David Whitmore was no longer inside. He was home recovering, and his son Thomas had taken over the practice. Thomas Whitmore Jr. met us in the reception area, a man in his early 40s, with his father's sharp eyes and his mother's precise demeanor. He shook our hands and gestured toward the conference room. Gentlemen, my father told me you'd be coming. The conference room smelled like leather and old paper, the kind of scent that clings to law offices. Thomas Whitmore Jr. gestured for us to sit at the long mahogany table, then crossed to a wall safe, hidden behind a framed print. He spun the dial, pulled the door open, and withdrew a manila folder embossed with my name. My father kept the original here, Thomas said, setting the folder in front of me. He never trusted digital storage for estate documents. I opened the folder. Inside lay a will dated March 15th, 2020, signed in my own handwriting and witnessed by David Whitmore and his secretary. The language was straightforward upon my death. My estate would be divided equally between Dominic Locke and Sadie Locke, with a trust established for Sadie until she turned 25. This is the real one, I said quietly. Thomas nodded. That's the version my father filed with the state. But 3 weeks ago, when you brought him that vodka, he pulled up the case file and found something else. He opened his laptop and clicked a file. A PDF appeared. Another will dated August 15th, 2024, bearing a digital signature that looked like mine. This version left 100% of my estate to Dominic Locke. No mention of Sadie. Frank leaned forward, his jaw tight. How did this get into your system? And that's what we hired Catherine Walsh to find out. Catherine Walsh arrived 10 minutes later, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and the demeanor of someone who spent her days dissecting code. She set a tablet on the table and pulled up a slideshow. Gentlemen, she began, your son executed a 3-layer attack on Whitmore and Associates' system. Let me walk you through them. She tapped the screen. The first slide showed a server log, rows of data stamped with dates and IP addresses. Layer 1, cyber intrusion. On August 15th at 2:34 a.m., someone accessed the firm's cloud server using credentials belonging to a former paralegal. The access originated from IP address 198.51.100.42, which traces to Unit 407 at the Laurelhurst Towers in Portland. My breath caught. Dominic's apartment. The intruder navigated directly to your case file, deleted the original will, dated March 2020, and uploaded a forged PDF dated August 2024. Total time in the system under 2 minutes. Frank made a note. Clean, professional. Catherine nodded. Very. But they made one mistake. Server logs capture metadata. We traced the IP through 3 proxy layers back to the Laurelhurst address. Ridgeview PD confirmed the lease is under Dominic Locke's name. She swiped to the next slide. A grainy photograph of a hallway, time-stamped September 12th, 2024, 11:55 p.m. Layer 2, physical intrusion. This is footage from a backup security camera. At 11:55 p.m. on September 12th, A man approximately 5 feet 10 inches tall entered the office. He wore a hoodie and gloves, but his build matches a male in his mid to late 30s. She zoomed in. The figure moved with purpose, heading straight for David Whitmore's office. He was inside for 8 minutes. The next morning, Mary Baker found a printed copy of the forged August will in the pending files tray on her desk. The paper stock matched the firm's letterhead. Mary assumed Mr. Whitmore had printed it himself and filed it accordingly. Thomas interjected. "My father never printed that will. He didn't even know it existed until you brought him the vodka and he cross-checked the files." Catherine swiped again. The third slide showed an email header, lines of code across the screen. Layer 3, Social Engineering. On October 8th at 9:20 a.m., Mr. Whitmore received an email from edgar.drake.official@gmail.com. The subject line read, "Updated will, please review." The body was brief, asking him to update his records and signed with your name. She looked at me. "You don't use Gmail, do you, Mr. Drake?" "No. I've had the same Yahoo account for 15 years. Exactly. The email was spoofed. When we examined the headers, the originating IP was once again 198.51.100.42. Dominic's apartment. Frank exhaled slowly. 3 layers? Cyber, physical, social. Incorrect, Catherine said. Each layer reinforced the others. If the digital forgery was discovered, the printed copy provided corroboration. If someone questioned the printed copy, the email created a false paper trail. This wasn't opportunistic detective. This was premeditated, methodical, and executed over a 2-month period. I stared at the dates on the screen, August 15th, September 12th, October 8th. Dominic had started planning this in mid-August, weeks before my birthday. Weeks before he sent the poisoned vodka. He'd built redundancies, anticipated obstacles, covered every angle. My son had studied how to erase me. Frank stood gathering the forensic reports. "Thomas, I need certified copies of everything. The original will, the server logs, the security footage, the email headers. I'll forward them to the prosecutor's office today." Thomas nodded. "I'll have them ready within the hour." Frank turned to me. "Edgar, we've got him. The IP traced the physical evidence, Sarah's testimony, Vinny's information. It's enough for an arrest warrant. I'll call Judge Holloway this afternoon." I couldn't speak. I could only nod. The following night, I sat alone in my study, the house dark except for the lamp on my desk. Rain tapped against the windows. I opened my journal to a blank page and began to write. October 24th, 2024, 11 p.m. Today, I learned the full extent of Dominic's plan. He hacked the law firm's server on August 15th, deleted my real will, and uploaded a forgery. On September 12th, he broke into the office and planted a printed copy. On October 8th, he sent a fake email to David posing as me. 3 layers. 3 separate crimes, all designed to ensure that when I died, when he succeeded in poisoning me, there would be no question about who inherited my estate. Frank says we have enough for an arrest warrant. Tomorrow or the day after, Dominic will be taken into custody. I should feel relief. Instead, I feel hollow. I closed the notebook and stared at the rain. The rain had softened to a quiet whisper against the windows, a steady hush that filled the house with a kind of fragile calm. I sat alone at the kitchen table beneath the warm yellow glow of the overhead lamp, my journal open in front of me. The pen rested heavily in my hand, as though it understood the weight of what I was about to write. Outside, the tall maple trees swayed slowly in the wind, their branches brushing against the siding with a faint scraping sound. For a long moment, I simply stared at the empty page. Then I turned to a fresh sheet and began to write. October 24th, 2024, 11:10 p.m. Tomorrow morning, Frank Miller will execute an arrest warrant for Dominic Locke. Before that moment arrives, I need to put everything on paper. Not for the courtroom, Frank and Catherine have already gathered more than enough evidence for that, but for myself. I need to see the path clearly. I need to understand how my son became someone I barely recognize. I wrote the heading slowly. Timeline of events. October 12th. I received a bottle of vodka from Dominic via FedEx. The label read, Blackthorn Crystal Reserve, 1952, an expensive collector's bottle valued at roughly $3,800. Inside the package was a handwritten birthday card. I never drank the vodka. Later that afternoon, during a meeting with my attorney David Whitmore to discuss updates to my will, I gave the bottle to him as a gift. October 12th, 9:47 p.m. Margaret Whitmore called me in a panic. David had collapsed shortly after drinking a small amount of the vodka, approximately 50 milliliters. His heart went into severe arrhythmia, and he was rushed to the hospital. Within hours, I became the primary suspect. October 14th. Toxicology confirmed that the vodka had been contaminated with aconitine, an extremely potent poison derived from monkshood. David survived only because he drank a small quantity. That same afternoon, Dr. Brennan discovered something even more disturbing. My heart medication had been replaced. The pills in my prescription bottle were not nitroglycerin. They were amlodipine, a calcium channel blocker. If I had taken one during a serious angina attack, my blood pressure could have collapsed within minutes. I would likely have died. October 15th. Dominic called me. I recorded the entire conversation. During the call, he asked if I had drunk the vodka. When I told him I had given the bottle to a friend, he immediately asked which friend. His tone told me everything. He already knew someone had consumed it. October 16th. I discovered that the black thread I had stretched across my door frame as a tripwire had been snapped during the night. The dummy security camera on my porch had also been rotated away from the driveway. Someone had entered my home. Later that day, forensic handwriting analysis confirmed that Dominic had written the birthday card. At the same time, IIT investigators discovered that Dominic had hacked the Whitmore and Associates law firm server in August to alter my will. I was officially cleared as a suspect. October 17th. I found an envelope on my porch containing a black and white photograph of my house. The image was time-stamped 11:47 p.m., October 16th. Someone had been standing outside my home taking pictures while I slept. That same morning, I suffered a severe angina attack and nearly took the falsified medication. Dr. Brennan arrived in time with verified nitroglycerin and stabilized me. October 18th, 2:34 a.m., Vincent Russo, an associate of the Benedetti crime family, broke into my home. He explained that Dominic owed $300,000 in gambling debts. To secure those debts, Dominic had used my $500,000 life insurance policy as collateral. My death was supposed to pay his debt. October 20th. My granddaughter Sadie called me through video chat. During the conversation, she mentioned that Dominic had been telling her, "We're going to be rich soon." She also said he frequently spoke to someone named Vinny, and she remembered overhearing Dominic mention my name, along with the word insurance. October 21st, I met with Sarah Locke. She confirmed Dominic's gambling debts and revealed that Vincent Russo had been monitoring their family for months. Sarah admitted Dominic had threatened to leave her and Sadie if she told anyone the truth. She agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. October 23rd, Thomas Whitmore Jr. and Assistant District Attorney Catherine Walsh presented the final reconstruction of Dominic's plan. It involved 3 coordinated stages. Cyber intrusion. August 15th. Dominic remotely accessed the Whitmore and Associates server from his apartment in Portland. He deleted my legitimate will and uploaded a forged version. Physical intrusion. September 12th. Dominic entered the law firm office after hours, printed the forged will, and placed it into the official records. Email spoofing. October 8th. Dominic sent a fraudulent email impersonating me instructing David Whitmore to finalize the changes. Frank confirmed the evidence was sufficient for an arrest warrant. I set the pen down and rubbed my fingers. My handwriting had grown tighter toward the end of the entry, the letters uneven from fatigue. The facts were all there. Clear, ordered, undeniable. But facts alone could not explain the dull ache behind my ribs. I stood and walked to the cabinet beside the refrigerator where Kate had once kept our photo albums. My fingers traced along the spines until I found the oldest one. Inside were the early years, fishing trips, birthday cakes, school pictures. I flipped through until I found the photograph. Dominic was 8 years old, standing beside a narrow creek with a fishing rod clutched in both hands. His hair stuck up wildly in every direction, damp from the water. His smile was wide and missing 2 front teeth. I stood beside him with my arm around his shoulders. Between us, we held a trout nearly the length of his forearm. Kate had taken the photo that morning. It had been a Saturday in June, back when weekends meant pancakes on the stove, fishing lines in the water, and bedtime stories before the lights went out. Back when my son had still been a boy who laughed at my jokes. I carried the photograph back to the kitchen table and set it beside the journal. For 10 long minutes, I stared at it. I searched the boy's face, trying to reconcile that child with the man who had poisoned vodka-hacked legal records and gambled on his father's death. I couldn't. At last, I picked up the photograph and held it carefully in both hands. "I'm sorry I couldn't save him," I whispered softly to Kate's memory. "But I have to stop him. If I don't, Sadie won't be safe." The photograph said nothing. I set it gently on the table and reached for my phone. Frank answered immediately. "Edgar, tomorrow morning," I said quietly. "Let's finish this." There was a pause. "You sure I'm sure?" "All right," Frank replied. "SWAT assembles at 0500. We move at 0630. You want to be there?" I closed my eyes briefly. "Yes. I'll pick you up at 6. "Thank you, Frank. Try to get some sleep." The call ended, leaving the house silent except for the rain. At 6:47 the next morning, I sat in the passenger seat of Frank's unmarked sedan, parked 50 meters from Laurelhurst Towers in Portland. Dawn had broken gray and cold. Fog hung low over the streets. Ahead of us, 2 black SWAT vans idled quietly at the curb. Officers in tactical gear moved with practiced precision, checking radios, adjusting body armor, preparing breaching tools. Frank glanced at me. "Last chance to wait at the station." I shook my head. "I need to see it." He nodded and lifted his radio. "All units, this is Miller," he said calmly. "Proceed on my mark." A brief pause. 3, 2, 1. Execute. The van doors burst open, and everything began to move. Before I continue and tell you what happened when they came for Dominic, leave the number 7 in the comments, so I know you're still here with me. And just a quick note. Parts of this story blend imagination with real-life inspiration for emotional depth. If it's not something you want to continue, you're free to pause here. But if you're ready, let's return to that cold morning in Portland. Through the windshield, I watched the SWAT officers advance through the gray morning fog, their movements smooth and silent like shadows gliding across the wet pavement. Their boots made almost no sound as they approached the entrance of Laurelhurst Towers, rifles angled low but ready. The sleek glass and steel building rose above them, a monument to wealth and ambition, its upper floors still dark against the pale dawn. Somewhere on the 4th floor unit, 407, my son was waking up. He had no idea that the life he had carefully constructed out of lies and desperation was about to collapse. Frank sat beside me behind the wheel, his eyes fixed on the operation unfolding ahead. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he broke the silence. "You shouldn't be here, Edgar." "I know," I said quietly. "But you deserve to see it." My throat tightened, and I gave a small nod. Frank had bent more than a few rules to allow me to ride along. Official procedure said I should be back at the station waiting for updates. But Frank understood something the rulebook never could. I needed to witness this. At 6:49 a.m. his radio crackled to life. "Breacher in position. Ready on your mark, detective." Frank picked up the mic. "All units hold," he said. "Confirm exits secured." A voice replied immediately. "South exit clear." Another voice followed. "North exit clear. Parking garage secured." Frank exhaled slowly before speaking again. "Execute on 3. A brief pause. 1, 2, 3. Go." The lead officer swung the battering ram forward. The door to Unit 407 exploded inward with a violent crack that echoed across the quiet street. The team surged through the doorway in a controlled flood of motion. Police search warrant. Hands where we can see them. Their voices overlapped in sharp commands that cut through the fog. From where I sat 50 meters away, I couldn't hear Dominic's reply, but I didn't need to. Through the open doorway, I could see the officers spreading through the apartment flashlights, slicing through the dim interior. Seconds later, 2 of them reappeared, guiding a tall figure between them. White t-shirt, boxers, hands cuffed behind his back. Dominic. Even from this distance, I recognized the shape of his shoulders, the tilt of his head, the quiet confidence in the way he walked. He didn't struggle. He didn't shout. He simply walked between the officers as if the entire scene were nothing more than an inconvenience. Behind him, another figure appeared in the doorway. Sarah. She held Sadie tightly against her chest. Sadie's face was buried in her mother's shoulder, her small body shaking as she cried. Sarah's eyes were red and swollen. Then Sadie lifted her head. "Daddy." Her voice tore through the morning air, high and desperate. My chest cracked open. Frank reached across the seat and gripped my arm. "Stay in the car, Edgar." I stayed. 15 minutes later, the officers escorted Dominic toward a waiting transport van. As they secured him inside, a black sedan pulled quietly to the curb. The driver's door opened. Vincent Russo stepped out. He wore a dark suit this time, his expression calm and unreadable. Without hesitation, he walked directly toward Frank. In his hand was a small plastic evidence bag. Inside it was a USB drive. Frank stepped out of the car and met him halfway. "This the recording?" Frank asked. Vinny nodded. "October 10th, he said. "Dominic and my former employers. Everything you need." His Brooklyn accent was flat and businesslike. "I've already spoken with the prosecutor's office. Full cooperation in exchange for immunity. My lawyer's handling the paperwork." Frank held the drive up toward the light. "When did you record it?" 2 weeks before the vodka shipment, Vinny replied. Dominic called to confirm the timeline. "I recorded it as insurance." He glanced toward the transport van. Didn't want to be left holding the bag if things went sideways. A faint shrug. "Looks like they did." Frank slid the USB into his pocket. "You'll still need to testify." "I know. My lawyer will coordinate with the prosecutor." Vinny turned to leave, then paused. For a brief moment, he looked toward our car. Our eyes met through the windshield. He gave a single nod. Not an apology, just acknowledgement. Then he climbed back into his sedan and drove away. Frank returned to the car and plugged the USB drive into his tablet. After a moment, he handed me a single earbud. "You sure you want to hear this?" he asked quietly. "Yes." He pressed play. A burst of static filled the speaker. Then Dominic's voice emerged, clear, calm, and chillingly composed. "The old man won't drink it," he said, "but his lawyer will." My fingers tightened around the edge of the seat. "Once the medication finishes him off," Dominic continued, I'll have the insurance payout and the estate. 500,000 plus whatever remains after probate. He paused. That clears the debt and leaves me ahead. Another voice answered. Older. Rough. You better not screw this up, kid. 300 grand is a steep price for forgiveness. A short silence. If you don't deliver, the man added coldly, we collect another way. And your wife and kid make convenient collateral. Dominic didn't hesitate. I won't screw it up, he said. The plan's airtight. No one questions a birthday gift from a son to his father. Good, the older voice replied. Call me when it's done. The recording ended. I pulled the earbud out slowly. My hands were shaking. Frank said nothing as he took the tablet back. Across the street, the transport van sat waiting. Through its small window, I could see Dominic sitting inside, his face turned toward the glass. Then, as if sensing my stare, he turned his head. Our eyes met. And he smiled. Not nervously, not apologetically. It was a slow, deliberate smile. A smile that said he knew exactly what he had done, and that he would do it again. For a moment something flickered in his jaw, a brief tightening, the smallest crack in the mask. Then it vanished. For 5 long seconds we stared at each other across 50 meters of wet pavement, father and son. And I realized there was nothing left in his eyes that I recognized. The van's engine started. Moments later, it pulled away. Sadie suddenly broke free from Sarah's arms. She ran toward the street, her small legs pumping as she cried, Daddy, Daddy, don't leave me. I was out of the car before I realized I had moved. I crossed the distance in long strides and caught her just before she reached the curb. She collapsed against me, her sobs violent and uncontrollable. I held her the way I used to hold Dominic when he was small. It's okay, sweetheart, I whispered, even though nothing about this was okay. I've got you. Sarah reached us seconds later, pale and exhausted. Edgar. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't know. I swear I didn't, I know, I said quietly. Take her home. Frank will contact you about the trial. Sarah nodded and took Sadie's hand, leading her slowly back toward the building. By 10 o'clock that morning, I sat inside a windowless interrogation room at Portland Police Headquarters. A 2-way mirror covered the far wall. Frank stood beside me with his arms crossed. The door opened. 2 officers escorted Dominic inside. His hands were still cuffed. His expression remained calm. They seated him across the metal table and stepped back toward the door. Dominic looked up. His eyes met mine. The same cold smile returned to his lips. Hello, Dad. The interrogation room was small and windowless, lit by a single fluorescent panel that hummed like a dying wasp. A metal table bolted to the floor separated us, its surface scarred with initials and crude drawings left by 1,000 suspects before my son. Dominic sat across from me, his hands cuffed in front of him, resting on the table. His white t-shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, but his posture was relaxed, almost casual, as if this were a coffee shop conversation, rather than the prelude to a murder trial. Frank stood in the corner with a uniformed officer, arms crossed, watching us both. The air smelled like old coffee and industrial cleaner. Dominic tilted his head, studying me the way you'd study a chessboard, calculating his next move. So, what now, Dad? You going to tell me how disappointed you are? I didn't answer immediately. I couldn't. My throat felt like it was packed with gravel, and my hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the table to keep them still. Frank stepped forward. Edgar, you don't have to do this. We have everything we need for the case. You can wait outside. I shook my head. I need to talk to him. Frank glanced at Dominic. You willing to speak with your father, just the 2 of you? Dominic's eyes flicked between us, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Sure. Why not last chance for a heart-to-heart, right? Frank's jaw tightened, but he nodded. He gestured to the officer, and the two of them stepped out of the room, the door clicking shut behind them. I knew Frank would be standing behind the one-way mirror on the far wall, watching, listening, recording every word. But for the next 10 minutes, it would just be me and Dominic. Alone. Why? I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Why, Dominic, I gave you everything. He laughed, short, bitter, empty. Everything you gave me, lectures, Dad, rules, curfews. Do the right thing, Dominic. Be honest, Dominic. Work hard, Dominic. You gave me a childhood full of disappointments disguised as lessons. How's I gave you a home, an education. I was there for every birthday, every baseball game, every every baseball game where you showed up late because you were chasing some case that mattered more than I did. His tone was flat, rehearsed, as if he'd been practicing this speech for years. Mom died because you were too busy playing the hero detective to notice she was sick. The words hit me like a fist. Your mother had cancer, Dominic. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. By the time we found it, there was nothing anyone could do. I sat by her bed every single day for 8 months. I held her hand when and you still couldn't save her. He leaned forward, his cuffed hands sliding across the table. You couldn't save her, and you couldn't save me. So yeah, Dad, forgive me if I don't see you as some kind of saint. I stared at him, trying to find the boy I used to know in the stranger sitting across from me. This isn't about your mother. This is about you owing $300,000 to a crime family, and deciding the easiest way out was to poison your own father. Not poison, insurance. Dominic shrugged, the gesture so casual it made my stomach turn. The Benedettis were going to finish me. You think I wanted to do this? You were just convenient. The policy was already in place. You're old. You have a heart condition. No one would have questioned it if you'd had another attack and didn't wake up. I'm convenient. I repeated the word slowly, tasting its ugliness. That's what I am to you, convenient. Yeah, he didn't blink. That's what you are. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the pain radiating from my chest. Not angina this time. Just grief. Now what about Sadie? I asked, finally opening my eyes. What about your daughter? She's 10 years old, Dominic. She watched you get arrested this morning. She screamed for you. For the first time, Dominic's mask slipped. His eyes flicked away from mine just for a second, and he blinked. Once quick and involuntary, as if the question had caught him off guard. Then the coldness returned. She'll be fine, he said, his voice too steady, too controlled. Kids are resilient. Sarah will remarry eventually. Sadie won't even remember me in a few years. You don't believe that? Then I have to. He looked down at his cuffed hands, turning them over, as if noticing them for the first time. Because if I don't, then I have to admit I destroyed my daughter's life along with yours. And I'm not ready to do that yet. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady, and placed both hands flat on the table. I loved you, Dominic. I still do. But I can't protect you from this. I won't. He didn't look up. I know. You tried to kill me. You poisoned David. You forged my will, hacked a law firm, swapped my medication. You put your wife and daughter in danger. You don't get to walk away from this. I'm not asking to. His voice was quiet now, drained of the bravado he'd worn like armor. I knew what I was doing, Dad. I knew it would end like this. I thought I'd have more time. I thought the plan was better than it was. I turned toward the door, then stopped. Do you regret it? Silence. Do you regret trying to end my life so you could pay off your debts? Dominic lifted his head, and for a moment I saw something raw and unguarded in his eyes. Not remorse exactly, but exhaustion. the exhaustion of a man who'd spent years running from consequences and had finally been caught. "No," he said softly. "I don't. I needed the money. You were in the way." That's all it was. I nodded, the last fragile thread of hope snapping inside me. "Then we're done here." I walked to the door and knocked twice. Frank opened it immediately, his expression unreadable. "Take him back to holding," I said without looking at Dominic again. "We're finished." As I stepped into the hallway, I heard Dominic's voice one last time, faint and empty. "Goodbye, Dad." I didn't turn around. 6 weeks later, on the morning of December 8th, I stood outside courtroom 3B at the Ridgeview County Courthouse, adjusting the knot of my tie with hands that still shook when I thought too hard about what was coming. The hallway smelled like floor polish and old wood, and the winter light slanting through the tall windows made everything look washed out and gray. Frank appeared beside me holding 2 paper cups of coffee. He handed me one without a word. "You ready?" he asked. I took a sip, the coffee bitter and scalding. "No." "Good. That means you're still human." The courtroom doors opened, and a bailiff gestured for us to enter. The trial was about to begin. Courtroom 3B smelled like polished wood and old anxiety, the kind of scent that seeps into walls after decades of verdicts. I sat in the 3rd row behind the prosecution table, my hands folded to keep them from shaking. Ahead of me, Dominic sat beside his attorney, Rebecca Hayes, dressed in a gray suit that made him look almost innocent. His hair was neatly combed, his posture straight, his expression blank. He didn't look at me. Judge Patricia Holloway, a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, sat elevated at the bench. To her right, 12 jurors filled the jury box, their faces carefully neutral. The bailiff stepped forward. "All rise. The State of Oregon versus Dominic Locke." We rose. The judge gestured for us to sit. "I, Mr. Locke," she said, "you are charged with attempted murder in the 1st-degree fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. How do you plead?" Dominic stood shoulders square. "Not guilty, Your Honor." His voice was steady, confident. I felt something twist in my chest. Very well." Judge Holloway nodded to the prosecution table. "Mr. Morrison, your opening statement." James Morrison rose, a man in his early 40s with controlled energy. He buttoned his suit jacket and faced the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, over the next few days, you will hear a story about greed, betrayal, and cold calculation. Dominic Locke planned to end his father's life for money. Not in passion, not in self-defense, but methodically over 2 months, using poison-forged documents and stolen identity. He paced slowly. The evidence will show that Mr. Locke sent his father a bottle of vodka laced with aconitine, a lethal toxin. When his father refused to drink it, the vodka was given to David Whitmore, the family's lawyer. Mr. Whitmore consumed approximately 50 milliliters and nearly died." Morrison paused. "You will also hear that Mr. Locke swapped his father's heart medication with a dangerous substitute, hacked a law firm's system to forge a will leaving him the entire estate, and used a $500,000 life insurance policy as collateral for gambling debts." He turned to face Dominic. "This was not a mistake. This was attempted murder, premeditated and deliberate." Judge Holloway nodded to the defense. "Ms. Hayes." Rebecca Hayes stood approaching the jury box with calm deliberation. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client made mistakes. Serious mistakes. But mistakes born of fear, not malice. Dominic Locke owed $300,000 to a criminal organization that threatened his life and the lives of his wife and daughter. He was desperate. He panicked." She gestured toward Dominic. "But the prosecution wants you to believe Dominic is a cold-blooded killer. That's not true. Dominic was a man drowning in debt, manipulated by criminals trying to protect his family the only way he knew how." She sat down. The jurors exchanged glances. The prosecution called its first witness. "Dr. Michael Brennan, please take the stand." Dr. Brennan testified about David Whitmore's aconitine poisoning and the swapped medication in my prescription. Morrison presented the evidence bags containing both. David Whitmore was next. When Morrison asked him to describe October 12th, David's voice was steady but quiet. Edgar brought me a bottle of vodka as a gift. I drank approximately 2 ounces. Within an hour, I was experiencing severe chest pain. At the hospital, doctors told me I'd been poisoned. Catherine Walsh took the stand, next presenting server logs showing Dominic's apartment as the source of the hacked will. The digital will was uploaded from IP address 198.51.100.42 at 2:34 a.m. on August 15th. That address corresponds to Unit 407 at the Laurelhurst Towers leased to Dominic Locke. At 2 o'clock, Morrison called my name. The state calls Edgar Drake. I walked to the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Morrison approached. Mr. Drake, did your son know about your heart condition? Yes. He visited me in 2021. I showed him my prescriptions. And the vodka bottle, who sent it? On Dominic. It arrived via FedEx on my birthday. I didn't trust him, so I gave it to David Whitmore. David nearly died because of my instinct. I paused. At first, the police suspected me, because I delivered the bottle. But the evidence proved Dominic was the sender. Rebecca Hayes rose for cross-examination. Mr. Drake, you and Dominic have had a strained relationship for many years, haven't you? Yes. Is it possible someone else tampered with that bottle? No. The lab confirmed the seal was intact until David opened it. The handwriting matched Dominic's. The FedEx tracking showed shipment from Portland sender listed as Dominic Locke, Hayes pressed. But you admit you didn't trust your son. Couldn't that bias affect your testimony? My testimony is based on evidence, not bias. She nodded. No further questions. At 5 o'clock, Judge Holloway rapped her gavel. Court is adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow. I stepped into the hallway, exhausted. Sarah Locke stood near the elevator, her arms wrapped around herself. When she saw me, she nodded once. Tomorrow she would testify. The courtroom felt colder on the second day, as if the weight of what was coming had leached the warmth from the walls. I sat in the same third-row seat, watching Sarah Locke walk to the witness stand. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, her face pale and drawn. When she raised her right hand to take the oath, her fingers trembled. Dominic sat motionless at the defense table, staring straight ahead. He didn't look at her. James Morrison approached. Mrs. Locke, did you know your husband planned to harm his father? Sarah's voice was barely audible. I knew about the debt. I knew Vinnie Russo had been following us for months. But I didn't know about the vodka or the medication until Detective Miller told me. Adila, she paused, her composure cracking. Dominic threatened me. He said if I told anyone he'd take Sadie and disappear. I was terrified. Did you have any evidence of your husband's intentions? Yes. Sarah pulled out a printed email. Dominic wrote this to a lawyer representing the Benedetti family. It's dated October 3rd. It says, once the old man is gone, I'll transfer $200,000 immediately. Morrison held up the email for the jury. Once the old man is gone, meaning Edgar Drake. Yes. Rebecca Hayes rose for cross-examination. Mrs. Locke, you're testifying in exchange for immunity, correct? Yes. So you have every reason to shift blame onto your husband to protect yourself. Sarah's eyes flashed. I'm testifying because my daughter deserves a mother who tells the truth. Dominic put all of us in danger. I won't let him do it again. Hayes nodded. No further questions? At 10:30, Vincent Russo took the stand. He looked different in a suit and tie, almost respectable, but his Brooklyn accent reminded everyone of what he was. What, Mr. Russo? You were employed by the Benedetti crime family to monitor Edgar Drake, correct? Correct. Why, Dominic Locke owed 300 grand. He told my employers he'd pay it off with a life insurance policy. $500,000 payable on his father's death. My job was to make sure the old man didn't run before Dominic could collect. Did Dominic ever express remorse for his plan? Vinny's expression didn't change. No. He talked about it like it was a business transaction. When I told him I was pulling out because I don't touch cops, he laughed, said his father was too proud to see it coming. Morrison held up the USB drive. You provided a recording of Dominic discussing the plan. Why? Insurance. I knew if things went sideways, I'd need proof I wasn't calling the shots. Hayes declined to cross-examine. At 2 o'clock, Morrison stood for his closing argument. Ladies and gentlemen, Dominic Locke is guilty of attempted murder in the first degree. Not manslaughter, not a crime of passion. Premeditated, calculated attempted murder. He gestured toward the evidence table. He sent poisoned vodka. He swapped life-saving medication. He hacked a law firm to forge a will. And when his father refused to drink the vodka and gave it to David Whitmore instead, Dominic didn't stop. He didn't call. He didn't warn anyone. He let Mr. Whitmore nearly die, and he let his own father become the prime suspect. Morrison's voice hardened. That is not the behavior of a desperate man. That is cruelty. The evidence is overwhelming. The verdict must be guilty. Rebecca Hayes rose. Ladies and gentlemen, my client made terrible choices, but those choices were driven by fear, not malice. Dominic owed $300,000 to a criminal organization that threatened to harm his wife and daughter. He panicked. She paused. But Dominic never directly harmed anyone. David Whitmore drank the vodka of his own free will. Edgar Drake never took the fake medication. No one died. This is not attempted murder. At most, this is reckless endangerment. She sat. The courtroom was silent. Judge Holloway addressed the jury. You will now retire to deliberate. A unanimous verdict is required. The jury filed out. The clock read 4:03. I waited in the hallway with Frank Miller drinking bitter coffee and watching the winter sky darken. Frank didn't try to make conversation. He just stood beside me. At 8:15, the bailiff emerged. Jury's back? We filed into the courtroom. The jury took their seats. Judge Holloway looked at the foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find guilty? The word hung in the air, heavy and final. On the charge of fraud, guilty. On the charge of identity theft, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, guilty. Judge Holloway nodded. The defendant is found guilty on all counts. Sentencing is scheduled for December 30th. The defendant is remanded to custody. Dominic stood slowly, his jaw tightening. He turned and looked at me. Not a Gedger, but a deliberate 3-second stare, cold and empty. Then he turned away and let the officers lead him out. I didn't move, I couldn't. At 8:45, I stepped out of the courthouse into the cold Oregon night. Snow had begun to fall, soft and silent. My breath misted in the air. Frank appeared beside me. You okay? I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. It's done. Because sentencing's in 3 weeks. Judge'll probably give him 20 to 25. You planning to be there? I shook my head. No. I've heard enough. Frank studied me, then clapped a hand on my shoulder. Go home, Edgar. Get some rest. I watched him walk to his car, then headed toward my own. The snow was falling harder now, and for the first time in 2 months, I felt something close to peace. But it wasn't over, not yet. Snow had been falling since morning, soft and relentless, blanketing the maples and the driveway in a silence that felt almost holy. I stood at the kitchen window, watching it accumulate white on white, erasing the tire tracks and footprints. Kate used to say, the first snow made everything new again, that it gave you permission to start over. I didn't know if I believed that, but I wanted to. At 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and found Sadie standing on the porch in a red winter coat, her blonde hair dusted with snowflakes, her cheeks pink from the cold. She held a small backpack and looked up at me with eyes that were too hopeful, too trusting. "Hi, Grandpa." I knelt down and pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the cold winter air. For a moment I couldn't speak. I just held her and tried not to let her feel me shaking. "Come inside, sweetheart. It's freezing out here." She sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate with too many marshmallows. She didn't ask about Dominic right away. She talked about school, about her friend Megan's birthday party, about the stray cat on their back porch. I let her talk, grateful for the normalcy. Finally, she set the mug down and looked at me. "Grandpa, where's Dad?" I'd been preparing for this question for 2 weeks, rehearsing answers that would be honest but gentle. None felt adequate. "Your dad made some mistakes, Sadie. Big ones. And because of those mistakes, he has to go away for a long time." "How long?" "A very long time." Her brow furrowed. "Did he hurt somebody?" "He tried to. He didn't succeed, but he tried. And the law says that when you try to hurt someone, there are consequences." She was quiet, staring into her mug. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading most. "Do you still love him?" My eyes burned. I reached across the table and took her small hand in mine. "Yes, I still love him. But sometimes love isn't enough to fix what's broken. Sometimes people make choices that hurt the people who care about them most, and no amount of love can undo that." A tear slid down her cheek. "I miss him." "I know, sweetheart, I do too." We baked cookies that afternoon, using Kate's old recipe card with the faded handwriting. Sadie stood on a stool beside me, measuring flour and cracking eggs with intense concentration. We didn't talk much. We just worked side by side and let the warmth of the oven and the smell of vanilla fill the silence. While the first batch cooled, Sadie wandered into the living room and found the photo album on the coffee table. She carried it back to the kitchen and climbed onto the stool, flipping through the pages. "Is this Dad?" I looked over her shoulder. The photograph showed Dominic at 8 years old, standing beside a creek with a fishing rod, his grin gap-toothed and wide. I stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder. "That's him. We went fishing that day. He caught a trout almost as big as he was." Sadie traced the image with one finger. "He looks happy." He was. For a long time he was very happy. "What happened?" I sat down beside her. "He got lost, I think. Life got complicated, and he made choices that took him farther and farther away from the person he used to be. By the time he realized how far he'd gone, he didn't know how to come back." Sadie was quiet. Then she said, "Do you think he'll ever find his way back?" "I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so. But hope doesn't always mean things will turn out the way we want." She nodded, solemn and small, and closed the album. At 8 o'clock, Sarah arrived to pick her up. Sadie hugged me tightly at the door, her arms wrapped around my waist. "I love you, Grandpa." "I love you too, Sadie. More than you'll ever know." Sarah met my eyes over Sadie's head, her expression tired but grateful. "Thank you, Edgar." I nodded. "Take care of her." "I will." I watched them walk to the car through the falling snow. Sadie's red coat bright against the white, and didn't close the door until their taillights disappeared. I sat at the kitchen table with my journal open, the pen heavy in my hand. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, the house felt emptier than it had in weeks. I began to write. December 23rd, 2024, 8:15 p.m. 1 week from today, Dominic will be sentenced. Frank called this afternoon. The prosecutor is recommending 25 years with parole eligibility after 15. I won't be there. I've sat through enough courtrooms. For 48 hours after David was poisoned, I was the prime suspect. That stain doesn't wash off easily. Dominic will spend the next 15 years, maybe more. in a cell. And I will spend them here trying to make sense of what he became. Trying to remember the boy in the photograph, the one who laughed and fished and believed his father was a hero. I paused, staring at the words, then looked at Kate's photograph on the mantel. I whispered to her image. I tried to save him, Kate. I did everything I could. But I couldn't. I picked up the pen again. But I can save Sadie. She's still innocent, still whole. And maybe that's enough. I closed the journal. Through the window, the snow fell soft and silent, covering everything. It covered the tire tracks, the footprints, the bare branches of the maples. It covered everything, and for the first time in 2 months, I let myself believe that Kate had been right. That the first snow gave you permission to start over. Outside, the world was white and quiet and new. If you've stayed with me all the way to this moment, I want you to understand something important. This family story was never meant to be only about me. It belongs to every parent who has watched a child slowly drift out of reach, every father or mother who has stood at the painful crossroads between love and doing what is right. My family story taught me a lesson. I wish I had learned earlier, blood alone does not guarantee loyalty, and sometimes the people we trust the most can become strangers without us realizing when it happened. Looking back now, I can admit that I made mistakes too. I spent most of my life being a detective, solving other people's problems, chasing criminals, and protecting strangers. Meanwhile, the danger was growing quietly inside my own home. These kinds of truths appear often in Grandpa's stories, because time gives us the painful clarity we didn't have when life was moving fast. I wish I had seen the warning signs earlier. Maybe things could have been different. Maybe not. But regret is something many fathers carry quietly in their hearts. That's why this family story is not only about betrayal, it's also about reflection. If you are listening to this and you have children, don't wait until distance becomes silence. Ask questions. Listen more carefully than you speak. Be present in their lives, even when work and responsibility try to pull you away. Many Grandpa stories remind us that the biggest tragedies in life often start with small conversations that never happened. Life has a strange way of continuing forward even after everything falls apart. Sadie still comes to visit. We bake cookies the way Kate used to. The snow still falls across the yard every winter morning. And like many quiet Grandpa stories, there are moments where healing happens slowly, one ordinary day at a time. I still believe that somewhere inside Dominic, the boy I once taught to fish still exists. Maybe lost. Maybe buried beneath years of bad decisions. But not completely gone. If this story touched you or reminded you of something in your own life, feel free to leave a comment and share where you're listening from. Your thoughts matter more than you know. And if you enjoy listening to Grandpa stories like this one, consider subscribing so you won't miss the next story. Thank you for walking this road with me. Disclaimer: this narrative includes fictionalized elements created for reflection and storytelling purposes. If it doesn't resonate with you, feel free to explore other content that may be more meaningful for you.